My story tonight is a simple one. It's about the campfire itself. No one can really say when the very first campfire was, but I bet you it was that night when mankind learned the ability to make fire for himself. And on that night, I'm sure they sat around the fire and they told stories of the day. And when you think about scouting, it's been around for over 110 years. And on every camp out, we huddle up around a campfire and we tell stories. And if you're really quiet on a certain night when the wind is just right, you can listen to the campfire itself, and the campfire itself will tell you a story. Let's listen.
My full name is Lord Robert Stevenson Smythe Baden-Powell of Gilwell. That seems like a very long name, especially for a fellow who has looked at life in a simple and uncomplicated way. When I'm with scouts like you, please call me BP. I was born February 22nd, 1857 in London, England, the sixth of 7 children. I attended Charterhouse, a boarding school for boys. But homework didn't interest me very much. I was much more interested in spending time in the outdoors. During the summers, my brothers and I often went camping. We even canoed all the way across England. We were sleeping in barns and haystacks along the way, catching fish and rabbits for food. We had a grand time. When I graduated from Charterhouse, I took the test to get into Oxford University. My older brothers had all gotten scholarships there, but I'm afraid I failed the entrance exam miserably. My mother was aghast. A few days later, I saw a newspaper announcement that said examinations were being given by the British Army. Those with the highest scores would be invited to become Army officers. I decided to take the test. I only had a few months to prepare, but I studied as I'd never studied before. I worked day and night on subjects such as math, English, science, geography, and when it came time for the exam, I was also tested in my sketching skills. As soon as the results were posted, I scanned the list and found that out of more than 700 people who took the test, I had finished 5th for infantry, but 2nd for cavalry. I felt redeemed. I received my orders. I was selected to serve with the 13th Hussars, one of the most famous regiments in the British Army. In the fall of 1876, I boarded a ship and sailed to India. What an adventure. I was then given orders to the Balkans in Eastern Europe. Here, I was to gather information on troop movements and fortifications of the Austrian troops in the region. Well, this was a kind of a dangerous job. And what I did is I was kind of like a spy. I put on old clothes and I grabbed a big butterfly net and I pretended that I was a butterfly collector going around and catching butterflies. And the Austrians just thought I was some crazy Englishman butterfly collector. But what I was doing is I made sketches of these butterflies. I would put into the sketches a detailed drawing of the fortifications. And as you can see, these are some of the sketches that I made, and you can see how I put that fortification into the wings of the butterfly. Well, that was actually a very good time in my life, lots of adventure. And then I was ordered to go to South Africa. And during this time period, the British and the Boers of South Africa were having a conflict. It was called the Boer Wars. And I found myself in charge of a small town called Mafeking. Here I had 1,200 men under my command, but I was surrounded by thousands of Boer soldiers. Now, they demanded that we surrender, but instead of surrendering, we did all that we could to convince the Boers that they were up against a much stronger force. Knowing that the Boer lookouts could see us, I had my men bury boxes of sand all around the perimeter of the town. We then put dynamite in one of the boxes and blew it up in hopes that the Boers would assume all of the boxes were packed with dynamite and could be detonated as landmines. We had no barbed wire, but my men drove fence posts into the ground anyway, and then they pretended to unstring rolls of barbed wire all around the posts, and they would always climb back and forth whenever they were moving around the edges of Mefking to make it look like we had barbed wire. The Boers were far enough away they couldn't see, and so this is how we defended Mefking, with little tricks. And the Boers could have easily captured the town if they'd have simply attacked with all their forces. The siege of Mefking lasted 218 days before elements of the British Army arrived and broke the grip of the Boers. When I returned home, I was startled to discover that I was being regarded as the hero of Mefking. And I was also surprised to see many boys cheering for me and holding up copies of Aids to Scouting. Now, this was a book I had written for the South African Scouts to be able to utilize scouting skills in the wild. I had no idea my book would have such a profound effect on young men. They seemed hungry for the kind of information I had written, and I wondered if this was a call to me to figure out a way to share more of the scouting life. To test my ideas about scouting for youngsters, I took a group of boys camping on Brownsea Island just off the coast of England. I carefully chose them so they would come from all walks of life. I supplied tents, but the boys had to put them up. The air was filled with excitement. The camp at Brownsea Island convinced me of the value of scouting for boys. I was sure that scouting could teach boys greater self-reliance and would guide them to grow into better men. After Brownsea Island, I rewrote my book to make it more appropriate for youth. This time I called it Scouting for Boys. In countries all around the world, people began to purchase my book and form scout troops. Canada, Australia, and by 1910, troops were springing up in the United States. I saw a need to expand the program to include boys under the age of 11. I organized the Wolf Cub program in England in 1916. Here in the United States, that became Cub Scouts. In 1920, scouts from many countries came together to host the first international jamboree. There were scouts from all around the world, and it was here that I received one of my greatest honors. I was getting ready to address them, but before I could speak, a voice from the back cried, "We, the Scouts of the world, salute you, Baden-Powell, Chief Scout of the world." The greatest honor that I have ever received, and to have so many boys finding value in scouting, I knew that the scouting movement had taken on a life of its own. I have been lucky to lead two distinct and intensively happy lives, first as a military leader and the second as a leader of boys. I have had the great fortune to leave a legacy in the form of the scouting movement, for which I am most grateful. I would like to close now by sharing a message and by wishing you all well during this time where we have to be kind of apart. My message for you this evening is, the real way to get happiness is by giving out happiness to other people. Try and leave this world a little better than you find it. And when your turn comes to leave this world, you can be happy in the feeling that at any rate, you have not wasted your time, but you have done your best.
Well, I hope you enjoyed listening to the campfire tonight. Thank you.